Well, hey there, folks. It is Monday night and we are live. Hey, welcome everybody to the After Hours live stream of the Mike Cybert Radio podcast powered by Poddex. I am your host. So glad to be here with you on a Monday night for our last show of the year. This is the last one for 2020. And for many of us, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit as we go, kind of good riddance in a way. But got a jam-packed show for you tonight. I get a feeling looking at the clock that this one's going to be like one of those extra bonus size ones. I've been compiling stuff throughout the day as I went, and I think I have way more stuff than I have time for. So I'll get through everything I got as best as we can. But before we get there, I want to remind you that this is a live listener participation live stream. So if you've got questions or comments as we go, don't be shy. Chime in the comment section on whatever platform you're streaming the show. All right, then. So let's just get right to it then and kick things off with some shout outs. Now, if you are watching us here on the live stream, you can imagine the shout out sounder in your mind. But if you're listening on the podcast, you'll get to hear Kiss singing "Shout It, Shout It." Shout it out loud. So I do have a few shout outs I want to kind of start off the top of the show with. First of all, coming up this Wednesday, December the 30th, that is when the brand new Transformers War for Cybertron Netflix series, the next chapter, Earthrise, drops on Netflix. And because of that, more or less, that's kind of like the prevailing Transformers related content this week is folks doing early reviews. Now, Netflix has done something really cool with these Netflix shows going back to earlier in the summer, starting with Siege, where they would get screener access for members of Transformers media, podcasters, presumably YouTubers, and perhaps web print journalist type of folks as well. More or less folks that aren't me. But they've I lost my train of thought right off the bat. But no, several podcasters and friends of the show, friends of mine, have been doing their watch throughs of Transformers War for Cybertron Earthrise, Chapter 2 of the War for Cybertron trilogy, and have been doing review content for that. And they were given a couple rules. Unlike with Siege, there was more bullet points of like, well, you can talk about this, but you can't talk about that. And around, apparently the restrictions were more basic and easier to follow. No character deaths, nothing about the final episode number 6, and nothing about character introductions. And I still feel bad that I kind of pointed this out, but my buddy Anthony Brucali, in his a spoiler-free review of Siege, War for Cybertron, he revealed that the character of Sound Blaster makes an appearance, and there's nothing in the Netflix guidelines or embargo or anything like that that says that he can't reveal it, because they were so exacting and specific in the content that he could talk about. But for me, being a fan of the Cassette Man, or I guess in this case now the Cassette Men, that was actually kind of like a huge spoiler for me, because I didn't know that character was, one, going to be a character, but then two, was going to actually be have a part to play in that episode of Siege. So Nothing like that this time around, but I wanted to shout out two special episodes, and I kind of jumped ahead in my shout out there. But the Transmissions podcast, yeah, I've been a guest on their show before. Daryl and Charles and Jeremy are friends of the show, friends of mine, and they did a special episode of Transmissions Alt Mode, episode number 18, talking about War for Cybertron Earthrise. And their guest was, you guessed it, Ant from TFU.info. And the show runs about 40 minutes, I think. And it was very non-spoiler. They kind of touched on what they thought of the Siege series. For the most part, folks were pretty positive on it, and then just kind of talked in broad strokes what their impressions of Earthrise was. And again, Earthrise drops this Wednesday, the 30th. But what I liked also is that they did it as a video that's available on YouTube. So you can check out Transmissions Alt Mode special number 18 as a podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, or you can check out the video on YouTube where it's Daryl, Charles, and Jeremy and Ant talking on video, on camera, kind of doing I don't think they did it live. I think it was pre-recorded, but it was still a filmed podcast. And I'm discovering more and more that folks in the COVID quarantines are kind of consuming podcasts and podcast type media as videos on YouTube. It's still something I haven't quite gotten used to, and it's still something that I'm kind of I don't want to say I'm a curmudgeon about it, but because of my workflow, I don't necessarily have that same opportunity to sit and watch videos as I do being able to listen to podcasts. But I'm kind of in a weird spot where I'm still working from work. And so, as such, I do still have a little bit of a commute. So anyway, check that out. That is Transmissions Alt Mode special number 18. That's available on the Transmissions feed and on their YouTube page. Now, speaking of my dude, Anthony Bricali, Ant from TFU.info, this week also saw the triumphant return of Transformers University in the form of TF News and Views number 41. And basically, much like with the Transmissions episode, this was Ant's non-spoiler review of War for Cybertron Earthrise, the 6 episodes that'll be out on Netflix on the 30th. He gives some really good insights about the Siege season 1, and he's got some really thought-provoking criticisms and observations about Earthrise. But I think that episode, TFU News and Views number 41, really dovetails with the Transmission show that I was just talking about. That I happened to listen to that one first. I was actually listening to it on my walk this morning while I was walking around. But I really liked how he embellished and fleshed out points that were only briefly mentioned with the Transmissions guys. He's got a lot of insight about the voice acting and the budgetary limits and a handful of other things there as well. But the thing that really stuck with me is he gave a really great perspective from the standpoint of, well, being a Emmy-winning news and sports television producer that I really appreciated. He analogies involving paper towels and t-shirts, kind of comparing certain types of television to clothing that really resonated with me in a big bad way. Kind of given my background here in news and talk radio for my day job, as well as podcasting here. I'd also like to mention, steer you towards his video that is available on YouTube as well. It's a little different than the video that they did for transmissions, where it's just the four of them, not all that dissimilar to how you're seeing me here now, dudes in a box. But apparently Netflix has either released or otherwise made available like some like 100 images, promotion stills for the Transformers War for Cybertron Earthrise series. So Ant took those stills and incorporated them into his video. So it's, you don't see him, he's not on camera, but as you go through, you'll see you'll see some new faces in there, as well as some old friends if you look closely at the images. Nothing too terribly spoilery. I wouldn't say anything that's any more than what we've already seen in the two trailers that are available for the Netflix series. So, but I thought that was really cool because, like, you know, just to see alternate angles of characters that we've already seen and have been revealed. Like, you see a little more of the mercenary factions, you see glimpses of the Quintessons, and it just yeah, it was really neat. And I also want to let you know that he'll be releasing a spoiler filled episode sometime after the show drops. But more than anything, I'm just glad he's back. Between moving to Florida and, you know, the holidays, it's, you know, it can be exhausting. To say nothing about just the general existential dread that is the year 2020. I know it's been hard for a lot of us to keep up the motivation to keep casting them pods, but I am again, I'm very glad that my dude Ant is back on the mic, and now that that Ant is doing more video stuff, like we saw with the transmissions guys. He and I might have to get together for a live stream sometime. You know, hopefully sooner than later. Before I move on, I want to shout out a couple folks in the chat. Apollo joins us as usual. So hey there, Shar. Thanks for joining us. But then I didn't have this in my notes, but I gotta tell the story very briefly about the power of social media, I guess. I've been on Facebook for maybe, I don't remember, maybe 3 years, something like that. And in that time, I've connected with and reconnected with folks from high school. Well, actually, yeah, a person or two. I had to think about it, but I had a friend of mine that I knew back in middle school, back in the 8th grade. His name's Chris, and he just popped into the chat here saying, "What's up, Mike?" And found me out of the blue, sent me a friend request, and sent me a message saying, like, "Hey man, I don't know if you remember me or not, but you know, we were buddies in the 8th grade and just kind of lost touch." And I've talked about this on the show before, but when I was a kid, I moved around quite a lot, and in some ways that kind of hindered my ability to kind of maintain long-standing friendships. Like, I don't have any longtime friends from childhood, you know, like folks that I like knew from grade school or things like that. Uh, I think that's what makes me so especially grateful for the friendships that I have now, that I've forged through podcasting and Transformers and Star Wars and you know, radio and music and you know, independent arts, and you know, kind of like this whole thing that that I didn't necessarily um do when I was younger. So it really surprised me when Chris found me on Facebook and reached out of nowhere. And with that, I would also share some advice. So if you happen to be on Facebook and you find somebody that you're like the algorithm matches you up, you might know this person, maybe enough mutual friends or other coincidences or things like that. um, I would recommend that you do what Chris did is, in addition to your friend request, send a DM also and say, "Oh, hey, by the way," because like I saw it and I was like, "Chris," I'm like, I remember being friends with a Chris back in the 8th grade, but, is this the same person? And by the time I did that legislation, he had reached out to me. So I thought that was a really cool story, and, maybe we'll take the opportunity and, reconnect at some point soon. But, yeah, that was I don't know. I get I'm occasionally beside myself, and especially around the holidays too, where it's kind of like, a time of transition, and kind of like getting over one year and going into the next, things like that. So anyway, I'm rambling too much about that. Speaking of our favorite robots in disguise, I have an Icon Online update for you that I would like to share. As a reminder, the as we discussed on last week's show, where we revealed VIP, our new team member slash mascot. And yeah, I mean that was a ton of fun. We did 2 live streams weekend before last, and I stitched it together as a double podcast episode. So that's available. That's last week's episode. But I want to remind you that the deadlines have been extended to January 3rd for both the cosplay contest as well as panel submissions. And I also want to remind you, as I look over at my notes, Icon Online, as we've mentioned over the last several weeks and several episodes, Icon Online is a not-for-profit, fan organized, fan run online Transformers event. It's a virtual convention looking to replace um more or less the entire 2020 convention season that we just kind of saw go out the window. But we're still accepting panelists and participants in the cosplay contest. You can head over to the website icononline.wordpress.com for both of those applications. And again, that deadline has been extended to January 3rd. And I would also mention that we've extended the deadline, not so much because we don't have enough content to fill the schedule. It's because we have an abundance of content and we're trying to figure out how to concoct the schedule, if that makes sense. So if you are waiting until the last minute to get in your panel submissions, this is pretty much the last minute. And I know there are a few friends of mine that I have kind of casually approached about doing panels, but the again, the submission period has not closed yet, so you got until January 3rd to be included in Icon Online. And we've also seen more cosplay submissions. We've seen some new folks in the rig category as well as in the human former category, which, as we learned in last week's podcast, is basically where you're through cosplay, you're reinterpreting a Transformers robot character as a human person. So like I have seen a lot of fan art circulating over the weekend. Some very very dapper looking Decepticons too. I thought that was really cool and kind of like sort of a bridge to human formers. I'm not a cosplayer. I don't speak to this stuff very well. I need Charlie to jump on and and kind of set me straight there. But more than anything, I did want to remind you that deadline has been extended to January 3rd. Go to icononline.wordpress.com and apply right now. But I have another awesome guest announcement that I would like to share with you right now. So give me just a moment here. I am going to share my screen and then so you're welcome to do a drum roll wherever you are at. I am going to share my screen and oh, hey, there it is. Look at that. We got him. Icon Online welcomes the one and only Livio Ramadelli as an official guest. He is going to be answering your questions along with Andrew Griffith and Shane McCarthy during the convention. There is a Google document that is available now. I'm just screen sharing a tweet here from the Icon Online Twitter account. So you can click on that Google Doc and that will take you to where you can submit your questions. And Livio's a cool dude. Like I've had him on my show to talk about his creator-owned comic series, The Kill Lot. That trade paperback just came out, so if you haven't checked out the Kill Lock yet, go ahead and do so. It's very different from what he's done with Transformers, but it was a really cool series. It's his first fully creator owned series for IDW Comics, and he's also a longtime IDW Comics artist for the Transformers. And again, he's just an all around good dude. I have been seeing him at conventions. I want to say since, and I clocked this when he was on my show, so that would have been 2019. And so, yeah, I've been seeing him at conventions since 2009. So for over 10 years, long before he started working on Transformers. And so I've just been a huge fan and a huge supporter of his art. So we're incredibly stoked and happy to have Livio Ramadelli as an official guest. And I appreciate his dynamic with Andrew Griffith too, because they are longtime friends. They go way back. They've had adventures together, and it's I forget which panels I've seen them at, but like I've seen them like interact and chat a few times, and so that's a lot of fun. I'm not as familiar with Shane McCarthy, so I'm very interested to see how having a third person in that mix adds to that savory dude stew that we're gonna have going on. And again, Icon Online, where all are one, is January 30th and 31st. It is a fan run 100% virtual Transformers fan convention. And yeah, we're just incredibly excited about it. It seems like every day there's something new that comes across our desk, and it's just incredibly exciting. So Livio Ramadelli is tonight's guest announcement, and he joins Flint Dilley and Greg Berger and David Marriott as our growing roster of spotlight guests. But I also want to let you know that you need to keep your eyes open on the Icon Online social pages, whether it be Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or Tumblr, because tomorrow That will be Tuesday, December 29th. There's going to be another exciting guest announcement, and watching the emails go back and forth with this particular guest, I'm excited that they're excited, and that's going to be really really cool. I cannot reveal who it is, with embargoes and whatnot, but watch the Icon Online socials on Tuesday. And then now, granted, if you're listening to this on a podcast, it's Wednesday or later. And the announcement has already happened. But yeah, it's just kind of funny how time shifting works. It's like talking from the past about the future. But I digress. That's going to be a ton of fun. January 30th and 31st, if you want to participate as a cosplayer in our cosplay contest, or if you want to apply to host a panel, those applications and submissions are open from now until January 3rd. And while you're there at the website, icononline.wordpress.com, you will also find portals to documents to be able to ask our featured guest questions. It'll take you to a Google Doc. You can submit up to 3 questions. They'll be screened by the staff and the guests. And I've never seen a convention do that before, and I think that's one of the cool things that Icon Online is kind of adding new spokes to the wheel, because one of the mission statements of Icon Online is that inclusivity that some of us feel like we haven't necessarily had in terms of representation and inclusion with some of the other larger fan conventions. So that's one thing that members of our team came up with, and I just think it's really cool. But the announcement train is going to continue, and it's going to keep picking up steam as we go into the new year. James has just jumped on the chat. He's one of the hosts of the Distance Nerding podcast, one of our Poddex posse out there, and he asks, where is the convention? Icon Online is on the internet. That's where the convention is. It will be hosted virtually. There will be a live stream that I believe, and Apollo might be able to. Distance nerding, yes. I probably said distance learning, didn't I? It's just funny how like some of those certain phrases just kind of stick in your head, and you get those Freudian slips. So yes, James, host of Distance Nerding, part of the Poddex posse, and again, Mike Cybert Radio is powered by Poddex. Use my promo code MSRP10 to get 10% off your first order. Anyway, sorry. Apollo jumped in the chat. I am all over the road tonight. I apologize. I think I've got a little extra holiday spillover in the shortened week before New Year's, kind of in between Christmas and before New Year's. But Apollo jumped in the chat and saying the convention Icon Online is indeed online, and provided a link to the website, again, icononline.wordpress.com. There will be our panels and content will be streamed on YouTube and Twitch, I believe. But that's, yeah, basically some of the content will be live, some of it will be pre-recorded, but all of it will be curated by the staff, and it's just going to be a lot of fun, trying to, as best as we can, replicate that convention going experience. Now, while the content is happening on the live stream, there will be a virtual artist alley where you'll be able to connect with independent artists none of which I can name because that um, a few things we still need to work out and haven't announced yet. But there will be a virtual artist alley where you can connect with independent artists, get commissions, buy merch, and that's something that we're really excited about as well. Because, quite frankly, part of the reason why we're doing this is one, we want to connect with our friends because we've missed going to conventions, but more than that, um, several artists kind of paid for a bunch of prints and merch that they can't sell because there's no convention. So, um, a lot of folks, especially in the local independent space, are sitting on a lot of inventory that they just can't move. So this gives an opportunity for um for that to make some sales and get connected there. James in the chat also mentions that distance nerding will definitely help promote. Sounds awesome, and I appreciate it. Go check out their show, Distance Nerding. It is it's I don't want to it's what I like about it is that one, it's very finely produced. The audio quality is very good, and I like that it's a cornucopia of different pop culture type stuff. It's like, you get your Star Wars, you get some wrestling in there, and I haven't listened to a lot, but I've really enjoyed what I've heard. And maybe we'll get together and do a collab episode one of these times. I think that would be super cool. So there is your Icon Online update for this week. And again, keep your eyes open for the Icon Online social channels. That's on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, and Instagram. All of those at Icon Online. Um, so I'm trying to figure out how to transition here. I want to tell a little bit of a Christmas story, but not like the Ralphie kind. First of all, I hope everyone had a great holiday. It's, as we've said, 2020 has had its share of challenges. I don't know about you, but I've had more than a couple family interactions over Zoom and other platforms. And while I've talked about this a lot before within context to uh, what we're doing here with the podcast and the live stream, as disconnected as we have been from each other, we've also discovered that through this technology, we've become connected in ways that we never thought to before. Like, I've been podcasting for 5 years, and I didn't start any of this video stuff until the pandemic. And really, it it became kind of the new standard for how I interviewed guests. That's really how it started. It's like, I reached out to somebody and they're like, "Oh, we're going to do it on Zoom, right?" And I was like, "Sure." And it's been interesting learning new tricks and adding new spokes to the wheel. But yeah, like I said, it's just been kind of odd trying to it's parodied in commercials quite a bit. Folks either doing team meetings at work or family functions on Zoom. I haven't done like the full Zoom family Thanksgiving or the Zoom family Christmas yet. I haven't been I haven't been brave enough to try that yet. But um we my wife and I, we had a low key Christmas. I we didn't stay entirely at home. We did a little bit of visiting, but in small independent groups and with a fair amount of physical distancing. And I wanted to talk about an experience I had at my aunt and uncle's. There were about a half dozen of us, and again, we were kind of physically distanced. But there was a time where my uncle kind of gathered us around, and fortunately they had a large enough living room, and he's like, okay, well, now that we're all here, looks me right in the eye, and he's like, so Mandalorian, what'd you think? And my my uncle Chris, I think one of his favorite things is to hear me talk about the things that I'm passionate about. Even if that's a passion that he doesn't necessarily share, I think he just likes that I like things. And it was interesting. So like, I kind of like on an impromptu thing just kind of did not all that dissimilar to what I'm doing here. I just kind of like did a show. I almost should have started with well, yeah, I mean, welcome back to Mike Cyber Radio, powered by Poddex. And but no, I talked about what I thought about The Mandalorian, and I'm not necessarily going to get into it too much here. I've got too much ground to cover, and I'm already way off schedule. But um, in a nutshell, for me, I feel that The Mandalorian is the best thing to come out of the Disney Star Wars era. Now, for some of us, for certain fans, um, this is what we thought the sequel trilogy was going to be, or at least what we wanted. And I don't know. I just there's a subtlety and a deftness to the Mandalorian. Apollo jumps in the chat. So amazing. Um, yeah, it was. I'm I'm looking at the chat and I'm getting distracted. Sorry. No, I guess brief thoughts on the Mandalorian. I really liked it, um, and it gave me things that I had wanted for so long that I kind of forgot to stop asking for. Especially kind of in the wake of the sequels and kind of the Disney era, for lack of a better term. But what really cracked me up as I was kind of doing this whole conversation about Mando and what I thought about it, and especially the return of a certain other bounty hunter, the return of Boba Fett. My cousin said, she's like, I uh, I I think I saw one of your streams on Facebook once, and it was late at night, so I just kind of I just kind of popped it on, and it was pretty good. It was pretty good, and I thought that was very sweet. But as she continued to explain, I must have been talking about either Transformers or Star Wars or Boba Fett or whatever. But it cracked me up though, because like she told me, she's like, yeah, there were more than a few times that I had no idea what you were talking about, but I'd say that I picked up on about 70% about what you were talking about, and it connected with me. I thought it was really good. So that's, to me, that's kind of the highest compliment that somebody can give. And I still struggle with some of that imposter syndrome, because I talk to you about it a lot. But whenever somebody tells me that they listen to my podcast, my my first impulse is to get bristly and shy and be like, "Oh, shucks." And I was doing some of that, and but I've learned to try to teach myself, and I've tried to give you that advice as well, that, it's like, just take the compliment. Someone is saying that they like your stuff. Be gracious. So I was, and I was like, well, because I kind of went around in a circle, but I was just like, well, but no, I appreciate you taking your time and hanging out with me, and for giving me feedback. So um don't lose sight of that. Those of us that cast the pods, it's like, if somebody is telling you something, then take that. Now, I a couple weeks ago, I talked about the return of Boba Fett, and kind of what it means to me. And it was one of those things that, I talked about this before, that, it's I thought the story had progressed so far that that's just something that we were never going to see. Maybe in a cartoon, maybe in comic books and novels, where he's resided for the last 20 some years. Um, but for him to reappear, and the way that he did, and the way that he was reintroduced, um, it was it was really special. Um, and even now, I'm still kind of trying to reconcile my feelings on it, because yeah, it's just a dude in a suit. But for some of us that have been fans of this character for so long, and in so many different iterations, it was incredibly satisfying and gratifying and validating, in that, I talked about this a couple weeks ago, so I don't want to necessarily retread it, but there's kind of been a postmodern uh backlash towards Boba Fett, like, oh, well, he looks cool, but he's a lame character and went out like a punk. And and then there's kind of like been a like post modern uh, approach to that, where it's like, well, yeah, I just like the character. And that's where I've been, and that's where I've landed. Like, I'm really quiet when folks are critical. And with that episode of The Mandalorian, and the subsequent the book of Boba Fett that will be coming next year. Again, I feel like I have a leg to stand on now, when I say that this is a cool character, and he is badass. And it's yeah, it's like I said, it's just something that I thought we would never get in live action, for so many different reasons. But the thing that was revealed is that there will be the next series on Disney Plus will be the Book of Boba Fett. It is coming December 2021. And I thought it was really interesting, because in the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian, the current storyline comes to what could be interpreted as a conclusion, and a satisfying conclusion, to the point where one wonders, where do you go from here? With with the reveal of the Book of Boba Fett, and the way that they revealed it, um from the Friday when the episode premiered, to the Monday when I think John Favreau was on Good Morning America, and kind of that, the Monday after is kind of when the unofficial embargo lifts, and we're putting out character posters, and anything that, I mean, from a certain point of view, the the spoiler ban is kind of lifted. Like that episode that Boba Fett returns in, by Monday, there was a full-size character poster of Boba Fett in his at that point then modified armor. But I thought during that weekend that the book of Boba Fett was going to actually be season 3 of The Mandalorian. I thought it was going to be The Mandalorian : The Book of Boba Fett, December 2021. But we've since learned that that is not the case. Season 3 of The Mandalorian will, I believe, be the next year after. So we're looking at 2022 before we get to see the further adventures of Din Djarin and his friends. So I think with that, there will be sufficient distance to see where the story goes from there, because that's a lot of time. And it kind of can create a actual distance. More or less what I'm dancing around is, I think there's going to be a time jump. I think there's probably going to be a significant time jump. I'm going to put it on record now here and say about 5 years. I think it's going to be like 5 years after the events of season 2, and we pick up on what Mando has been up to. And you know what? Since I got my speculator hat on, I think when we first see the Mandalorian at the beginning of season 3, 2 years from now, he's going to be in rough shape. I think he's going to be kind of similar to how Han Solo was in the interceding time that we didn't see between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, where, you know, he's gone back to smuggling, and he's distanced himself from his family. And I think that's where Mando is going to be. I think we're going to, for as much growth as he went through these last 2 seasons, I think he's going to regress that much farther. He's going to be like a harder, colder dude, like we saw in like the first episode of the first season. And I think that will be the story of season 3 will be him kind of trying to come back from that. But that's just me being a wild speculation person. Now, in terms of the Book of Boba Fett, I have no idea what that's going to be. I do think, though, that Boba Fett makes for a more effective crime lord than Darth Maul. Maybe that will lead to some kind of confrontation between well, no, that wouldn't work, because Darth Maul is, like, spoilers, dead at the time of Rebels, so that doesn't even work. Never mind. Unless they bring him back yet again. I have issues with that reveal at the end of Solo. It's whatever. So anyway, I don't want to overly litigate that, but I do want to do an episode dedicated to The Mandalorian. And I remember that I was talking with my buddy Jeremy from the Transmissions podcast that I was talking about earlier, and I told him that, yeah, man, we should do an episode on Mandalorian. And at this point, I think, like, I don't remember if season 1 had even ended, and I just never got back to it. So that's now that season 2 is over, I think that's something I need to do a deeper dive on, because, like, I keep teasing it here in these live streams, but I don't really, like, dig into it and talk about how those how all that works. But anyway, I want to go back to the chat before I go too much further, and this is what made me think of it and got me distracted. Jeremy types in the chat, back to Christmas we were talking about. We did Christmas dinner over Google Meet. It was odd, and as an audio nerd, I had to hold my tongue and not comment on the other's lack of a decent mic. Yeah, isn't that funny that we, as, like, podcasters, content creators, we really do become audio snobs? And it is, I mean, anytime I'm on like a Microsoft Teams call for work, I am just wanting to cut my wrists open. That's a dumb comment. Cringy. Um, let's see. Jeremy also writes, as a fan of 1.5 of the sequels, The Mandalorian blows them all out of the water. This is the Luke we always wanted to see, and you can see the care applied to the stories. And Jeremy is absolutely right. But I would also say, with regards to incorporating Luke, and it pains me to do this, but okay, so on Front Street, I guess I should have made my intentions more clear. I don't like the sequels. I especially don't like The Last Jedi, and as more time has passed, I like Force Awakens less. Like, I liked it at the time. I never loved it. But I did think it was incredibly serviceable and exactly what the franchise needed at the time. I do still stand by that, but I think in retrospect, it does get weaker. And Rise of Skywalker is just a mess. But I don't dislike it. And I'm kind of like a weirdo because I delight in how bonkers it is, because it is just mind-numbingly incoherent, and it tries to go so fast that you don't notice it while it's happening. So it's one of those things that it repeated viewings definitely show off its flaws, but it is just so silly. Like, I found myself smiling and laughing and enjoying the experience way more than I did Last Jedi, and even to an extent Force Awakens. I think I actually had the most fun with The Rise of Skywalker, but not for the right reasons. Um, but anyway, yeah, no, there's a line in The Last Jedi where old Luke, talks about, well, do you, just go at the Empire or I'm sorry, uh, do you want me just to charge at the First Order with the laser sword? And he has another comment later where he scoffs and he's like, oh, well, Luke Skywalker, the legend. And it's interesting how that's kind of like a weird call forward, call back to Luke as we see him, spoilers, in Mandalorian. I'll come back to that in a minute. James in the chat writes, Filoni, Favreau, and Rodriguez legitimized all the Boba Fett fandom, and I completely agree. I just watched that episode last night, and one of the goofy criticisms is, well, Tamora Morrison is an older guy, and he's a person of a certain carriage. That's to say he's packed on a little weight, but I think I talked about this a couple episodes ago also, but I actually like the increased bulk that he brings to Boba Fett. I think it makes him more imposing. Whereas, oh my God, and I didn't even mention this earlier, but prior to Christmas, after we did our last show, Jeremy Bullock passed away. The original actor that did most of the standing in for Boba Fett in Return of the Jedi and The Empire Strikes Back. And there's a physical presence with Tamora Morrison that you don't get from the Jeremy Bullock performance. But I really liked it because, like, I guess my own headcanon is that Boba Fett is very similar to Jason Voorhees in that, like, he just walks really slow, but he'll miraculously end up behind you to make the kill. And you see that in that scene where Boba Fett returns. He's very brutally but casually wiping out these stormtroopers. And I just, and even in that scene in the finale of The Mandalorian, where he's tussling with not Bo-Katan, but the other gal whose name eludes me. But there's again that physical presence that you didn't necessarily get previously. And I think the extra bulk is actually to the character's benefit. And I've seen a lot of apologists say like, oh well, it's he was wearing the thick robes and all of that, but dude's fat. It's okay. um but yeah, no, I like that, and I like what they've done with the costume. I love the black. I love the repaint look. I also like the distressed look, the kind of post Sarlacc look, and with the black robes. And I'm just excited that I'm sure we're going to get action figures of both versions. I guess they're calling it re-armored, which is kind of like the repaint. But I don't know. I just I'm excited that after all of these years, and we've gotten Mandalorian characters before through the Clone Wars and Rebels, but I never thought that I was ever going to see another version, an official canon version of Boba Fett ever again. And I've got my Black Series Return of the Jedi version on pre-order from the Pulse. I just bought the carbonized version of Boba Fett earlier this year, and I thought it was just going to be like those two versions forever. So to get him back in black, as it were, I'm just incredibly excited about that. So James writes a question: with how they introed the Book of Boba, is this Fett the honorable one we see in Mando, or do we get the ruthless bounty hunter / crime syndicate type character? I think it could be both, because there is a honor to Boba Fett, into the point where when we see him in Mandalorian, he immediately bonds himself to Mando's quest. He's like, I'm here for my armor. Great. Now that you've returned my armor to me, well, actually, he stole it out of the Razor Crest. Spoilers, but no, I think there is that honor there. But I think we've also seen one in how he handles the stormtroopers, and then how he makes his presence known at the end of the finale, that there is a ruthlessness there. And I think with Fennec, Ming-Na Wen's character, at his side, I think that will be an interesting dynamic as well. How tethered to him is she? I could really kind of see her being kind of like the brains behind the brawn. Like, for example, Boba Fett is the one that sits on the throne, but she was sitting at his side with that glowy blue juice, presumably in sharing in that power and authority as well. And you know what? Now that Agents of Shield is off the air, I'm just excited to get more Ming-Na in in I think she's great. I've always been a fan of hers, and I still don't quite understand her whole deal, like in terms of I guess she has a robot tummy now. I don't it's a little ill defined, that I think we'll see perhaps embellished as the Book of Boba Fett goes. But yeah, Book of Boba Fett, I hear, is a short series, much less than 8 episodes. Side note, we're getting Double Finnick in Book of Boba and in Bad Batch. Oh, I didn't know that she was going to show up in Bad Batch also. That's pretty dope. Let's see what else we got. Mando without a purpose, searching for who he really is, especially having more knowledge of the various tribes of Mando. Good call. Again, all of that from James. And with that, I did want to mention something. This is becoming a accidental Mandalorian episode, isn't it? But one of the things that I really liked in this season, I'm throwing the spoiler warning way out the window. So if you don't want to hear anything else about Mandalorian, punch out, and I'll see you next week. Come back to hear me talk about my top 9 Instagram, which I might be able to get to. But one of the dynamics that I found so very interesting in this season is they laid the groundwork so thoroughly for the Mandalorian's character in season 1, you know, the whole never take your helmet off, this is the way, and you know, his whole philosophy. And then as soon as he meets Bo-Katan, it's like he's the weirdo, you know, oh, you're one of those cultists. And it's an interesting move, whether it's a Star Wars or any kind of show or movie or something, to where, you know, you've had a year worth of the memes, and you know, again, this is the way, to where you're on board with that philosophy and how devoutly the character believes in that. And it's really something to kind of try to yank the carpet out from underneath and kind of take the piss out of one of the fundamental things about the character, to the point where that kind of starts the ball rolling, gets the gears turning in the Mandalorian's head. It's like, well, maybe this isn't the way, or maybe there's another way. And we see that as the season progresses, and I think part of that is when he encounters Boba Fett. You know, so it's like, not only has he seen Mandalorians that run around with their helmets on off, but he's also run into this I guess Jack Mandalorian, for lack of a better term. You know, he does the thing where he's like, beep boop boop, look, you know, this, I'm Boba Fett, my father was Jango Fett, and this is why the armor belongs to me. And that pays off when they're in the bar in the finale, because I mean, again, Bo-Katan is so pissy with him, where it's like, you're not Mandalorian, and he's like, I never said I was. And I think that's a way to be respectful to the various iterations of the Boba Fett character, where, you know, he was originally presented as someone that wore Mandalorian armor. It was never that he was specifically Mandalorian. And I, again, but they found a way to kind of square that circle, to where it's like, well, but my father Jango Fett was a foundling, so I'm kind of Mandalorian by heritage, if not by clan. So anyway, I to the point where the couple times he removes his helmet first, you know, when they go to the space cafeteria, you know, it's a big deal. And you know, and it's such a huge step for him, and it takes those incremental steps to where that's how you get to what happens in the finale. And one thing I wanted to mention, and this isn't a new thought, I've seen the memes, but it is goofy that the terminal to get all of like the secret files is in the lunchroom, in the Imperial lunchroom, the cafeteria, the break room. And basically the Imperial security protocols involve having a face. I really liked that line from Boba Fett where it's like, let's just say they would recognize my face, but they wouldn't recognize Din Djarin's face. They're just like, scan. Yep, you have a face. Have our secret files. And so I thought that was that was a little goofy plot convenience wise, but still the character beat is incredibly important to how the finale plays out. One last thing I want to mention on Boba Fett. Well, I'll go through the comments as well, but the one of the downsides of having Boba Fett show up in The Mandalorian and him being so important to so many of us is that I will fully admit that once Boba Fett showed up, that became what I was interested in. I kind of lost sight of the main plot for a while because I was so dazzled and fixated on he's back. And it's, oh, well, this has now become the Boba Fett show that, you know, I always wanted, but never thought I was going to get. I've told you in the past that, like, when I was in high school with my stoner friends, I said that I would like to see Boba Fett done as a Western. And I said that when I was 17 years old. So, copyright TM, a 17-year-old Mike Seibert. But anyway, no, I found that whenever Boba Fett wasn't on screen, I just kept wondering where Boba Fett was. And I found myself, when he was on screen, watching more intently, probably than was appropriate, than what I should have been. You know, it's like anything that having to do with Slave One, or, you know, just the way that they showed the ship, and even like the seismic charges, you know, kind of call back to attack. Loved all that stuff, but I would be lying to you if I didn't say that that kind of distracted me from the main plot. It's like, oh wait, that's right, there's that adorable green baby and his his Iron Man dad trying to reconnect. And so yeah, I lost sight of that. So I think it was a wise decision that when we get to the final battle, that Boba Fett just pieces out. Because, not for nothing, think about this, if he had stuck around, things would have gotten really awkward when Luke showed up. I'm surprised things weren't more awkward when Luke showed up, because, you know, he walks into this room and it's full of folks with buckets on their heads and T-visors. So it's like, oh, wait a sec. So yeah, it was so that was I just thought that was kind of like a interesting bit of storytelling and being smart about it. Let's see. Let's go back into the comments. Jeremy, Dad bod Boba Fett. Yes. And I mentioned this in my episode a couple weeks ago. Dad bod Boba Fett is definitely cosplay goals. My dude Dave Cabal jumped in. I don't like I didn't like Boba Fett at first, but seeing how Mando handled him, it looks like he's on a redemptive arc. I feel like he definitely felt disgraced on how he got knocked out in Return of the Jedi. I would love to see Boba Fett reunite with other bounty hunters like Bosk and Dengar. For sure. Throw me a Zuckuss and a Forlom while you're at it too. And even IG-88, because like we've seen what these IG droids can do. And I tell you, that was one of the most satisfying things too, is the way that the robot characters are presented. We got a taste of that with IG-11, and I had a discussion with a friend of mine at work when I first saw the trailer for Mandalorian, and you see like the spinning head and the swinging guns and how like methodical and robotic it all looked. I'm just like, oh, this is cool. This is something I've never seen before, but it's something I've always wanted. And so if you could bring some of that same energy to the OG, to IG-88, I'm there with it. But um speaking of the robotic movements, I liked what they did with the Death Troopers. I didn't at first, like when they first showed up, I thought uh I wasn't picking up on what they were putting down with like how stiff they were. And even now, after having watched the finale again last night, I still don't like the goofy jack-o'-lantern eyes. I think they're just a little too underdesigned and a little too corny. I guess I would have preferred something almost kind of similar to Kylo Ren's helmet, where it's like, almost flares like goggles and then just kind of like narrows in the middle, or something like that. But yeah, the triangle jack-o'-lantern eyes just didn't do it for me. But I I loved that they are so inhuman, because like droids that we've seen before in Star Wars, that's I think what kind of separates Star Wars from other types of presentation of robots, is that there is a humanity to it. Like, you have Anthony Daniels in the C3PO suit, so it has his humanity to it. Even like you had Kenny Baker in the R2D2 suit, wiggling around in that trash can there. Um Whereas the dark troopers were stripped of humanity to the point where their movements were incredibly stiff. And once I figured out that that's what they were doing, that totally makes sense. And I thought it was a good touch, especially once you bring in Luke, because you can't have Luke Skywalker chopping through a hallway full of dudes in suits. Like if it was stormtroopers, the same way that Darth Vader was cutting through rebels in Rogue One, it just wouldn't work. It would just be icky, and it just wouldn't feel right. But having them be soulless inhuman robots, it works. And the thing that I also appreciated is that there is a uh lethal brutality to Luke Skywalker's attack, in that you're reminded that, one, you're seeing Luke Skywalker at the height of his powers, something that we always wanted. But after the Last Jedi and after the Rise of Skywalker, we thought, well, there's no hope of that. It's like, it's just never going to happen. So like I said a while ago, something that I forgot to ask for. I had wanted it for so long. I forgot to keep asking. But you're reminded in this scene that he is Darth Vader's son. And I loved the callback, call forward to the Rogue One scene. And yeah, it was, again, it was, I guess in a sense, that's what kind of snapped me out of wondering where Boba Fett was. But anyway, great scene. Back to the comments. Uh, for a good solid week, though, everyone was praising that Cobb Vanth did more in the Boba Fett armor than Boba Fett did in the original trilogy, including you, my friend. I remember your tweets at that time. Anyway, so I hope to see Cobb in the Book of Boba Fett. Yeah, I I I'm a big fan of Timothy Oliphant. I loved Deadwood, and I guess my personal headcanon is that he's he's the same character when he's Marshall Cobb. But yeah, I would love to see. I mean, because they're on Tatooine now, so I mean, there's no reason why um, Cobb Vanth wouldn't return. Um, Maybe with his own modified set of Mandalorian-esque armor. I think that would be pretty cool. I think he's earned Boba Fett's respect. And I think he did right by the suit. And but the thing that does linger with me is, he tracks Boba Fett. I mean, he tracks Mando to this planet where he's gonna set baby Grogu on the Seeing Stone, and he's gonna reach out to the Force. And you get that scene where it's like, I've been tracking you, Mandalorian. I'm here for the armor. I love the stuff that Tamura Morrison does with the voice too, because like it's not quite what he was doing with Django. There's more of a harshness to it, and it's kind of closer to what Jason Wingreen was doing in Empire. What if he doesn't survive? He's worth a lot to me. There's some of that rasp to it when he's like, you know, I, I'm not here for your armor. I'm here for my armor. That kind of thing. I also like how he trails off with his S's. They almost kind of like hiss at the end. It anyway, I really like what he's doing with the voice, but the thing that I couldn't figure out that was kind of bugging me a bit is why didn't he just take the armor from Marshall Cobb to begin with? If he can best a squad of stormtroopers with just a gaffy stick, being all badass and Boba Fett about it, I don't know if Cobb could have stood a chance against that. I just don't know. Let's see. Jeremy, I think he meant the people would recognize him as a clone. Well, yes, yeah. Sorry, the security was stupid, but that's the Empire. Yeah, I maybe somewhere in there I didn't make that as clear, and I thought that was a great line too. He's like, well, let's just say they would recognize my face, and that's the other thing that I really appreciate about the Mandalorian in general, both season 1 and season 2, is that there's so many references and Easter eggs, but very rarely do they, one, hold your hand, but two, jab you in the ribs about it. And like I guess I guess an example of that would be after Boba Fett makes that remark about, well, I think they would recognize my face. If like, Bill Burr from Space Boston would be like, oh yeah, cause he's a clone, you see. That kind of thing, to where, there would be a more thorough explanation of uh what that joke was. But I think that's where Mandalorian is at its best, because it appeals to folks in my age range and demographic. Original trilogy fans grew up with this stuff, but it's also easily accessible and pays just as much reverence to the more contemporary stuff. Like there at this point now, I hate to break it to you, but there is an entire generation of kids that grew up with Clone Wars as their first Star Wars. And for this show in live action to bring in so much of that lore, and obviously it's from Dave Filoni, but like, there's reverence to all of this stuff and all of these new spokes to the wheel that have been there the whole time, that I think is equally satisfying. But I think where Mandalorian really accomplishes the hat trick is it appeals to casuals. Maybe folks that know something about Star Wars, but maybe aren't as deep in the lore. And it's approachable. Like, my wife digs it. And she likes Star Wars stuff and a lot of the stuff that I've put in front of her. But when we finally watched Mandalorian, she was like, "Oh, I like this." So that there was definitely a something extra there. So I where do I want to go from there? I got myself all over the place, but I wanted to say something about. Oh, I do have one bit of criticism with regards to this particular season of Mandalorian, season 2. Unlike season 1, now granted, I do get that they did the work and built the character and built the environment and the story and everything, in that season 2 kind of falls into a certain amount of backdoor pilotitis. Like, every time you see a new character, it's like they're auditioning for their own series. Now, granted, we know there's going to be an Ahsoka series. We know there's going to be something about Rangers of a New Republic or some such like that. Does that is that where Cara Dune goes? I kind of hope not. Or maybe it's like those two X-wing dudes from the ice planet. I don't really know, but my point being is like that it feels like that every episode of season 2 was like, oh, well, let's bring in these new people. Whereas in season 1, it didn't necessarily feel like that. It was more about the Mandalorian and his story and building his character. Now, again, since they did the work, they can do what they did in season 2. And again, I hope that season 3 is more like season 1, me personally. But yeah, it just kind of felt, it had kind of like that Marvel Cinematic Universe Disney quality to it. Like, oh, don't worry about it, we're going to totally spin these people off, and we're already seeing it. We've got we've got the Book of Boba Fett, we've got Ahsoka, we've got all of that other stuff. So yeah, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not mad about it, but I just kind of have been thinking about that. Let's go back to the comments here. Yeah, because I mean, chat has been popping, and I haven't gotten to any of the other stuff that I was going to talk about tonight. But Dave writes, totally agree. Cobb wouldn't stand a chance to Boba. I'm glad to be a part of the Boba Fett fan club. Oh, good for you, bud. Mad respect to the armor, my personal opinion, but I loved the armor before Boba Fett cleaned it up. I like the distressed look. And it looks like he's peacing out. Mad respect. But yeah, no, I like both. I mean, because I guess I've been a fan of the distressed look, so I like the re-armored, cleaned up version as an alternate. Like, it's like, oh, we're doing something different, but with the same suit. So like when he came out with like that fresh coat of paint and the cherry red goggles, gauntlets, and the just the deep forest green, I liked it because it's different. It's like, ooh, we're doing something new. Now, I've also said on the record that I'm a huge fan, actually, of the Jango Fett suit, and I like it because it's silver. It's silver with like that little bit of blue around the visor. So I like the Jango suit. It's like, the jetpack gunslinger. Okay, so Shar mentions in the comments, as someone that read the books, The Mandalorian was what I always wanted to see. Disney changed a lot of stuff from the books. I'd love to see the Thrawn series someday, but I don't know if that's canon anymore. Well, the original Thrawn stuff is not. That's all old extended universe stuff, and all of that is now Legends. So more or less it's nobody's coming to your house to take your books. But interestingly enough, while they have decanonized, like, all like the Dark Horse comics and like a lot of those well, not a lot of, all of, they've since gone back and reestablished Grand Admiral Thrawn as a character in, like, there's, I think Timothy Zahn, the original author, has already done like 2 or 3 Thrawn books. So there's new Thrawn material in addition to his appearance in Rebels. And I have a really hot take about Grand Admiral Thrawn. Jeremy put something in the comments that I gotta read here. He says Thrawn will be the Thanos with the culmination of all these series, and I'm kind of cool with that. I didn't even think of that. That's gonna really take some oomph out of the out of my hot take here, because there are some folks of a certain age, like I mentioned, that actually, kind of similar to Transformers, there are different entry points for Star Wars. Like I mentioned that, there's a generation of kids that grew up with Clone Wars, or even now have grown up with Rebels, or the sequel trilogy, or Resistance, or take your pick of like the current Disney canon that they're into. But there's also like a sub-series of folks, and I don't know exactly what the age group is. I'd have to think about it more. There are segments of the fandom that live and die by that Thrawn trilogy, to the point where they say that is their sequel trilogy, to the point where that's what they wanted to see Disney do, is adapt those 3 books, Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command. I have read those books. I like those books. I think they're fine. There are some cool characters and there are some cool concepts. That is not a trilogy of movies. There's one movie in those 3 books. And I think it would be a pretty damn good movie and a very satisfying one. Maybe you do it as a animated movie, kind of similar to like what DC is doing with some of their stuff, where they're just adapting old stories into animation. But we know that that's not what Disney is going to do. But I appreciated Grand Admiral Thrawn being introduced in Rebels. I liked what they did at the culmination of Rebels, where Ezra's disappearance is tied to Thrawn's disappearance, and those characters are now linked. I think that's really cool. But yeah, I think Jeremy's onto something there, where it's like with Ezra and Thrawn kind of lost in time. I think you could really do something with that, and if you seed it correctly, yeah, you could build to that almost like a Thanos style villain, because he is iconic in that same kind of way. Jeremy, I didn't read the original Thrawn books until my wife introduced them to me around 2008. They're good, but I really like what they're doing with him now. The book with him and Anakin / Vader was great. Oh yes. Yeah, it took me a sec. Because like it's interesting, because like there was a lot of the early Disney era stuff. Like I got like all the Marvel comics, and I read maybe like one of the Aftermath books, but then I just kind of jumped off, because this is not a rant about comics, but well, it is a rant about comics. Marvel just puts out too goddamn much stuff, and they have done to their Star Wars line the same thing they do with Spider-Man and the X-Men and Wolverine and Deadpool, is they put out so much material that I have found the only way for me to really cope is to just jump off. It's really kind of like war games in that way. The only way to win is to not play. So I do want to come back to Mandalorian at some point. And now, as I had originally structured this show, I was going to kind of segue from my talking about the return of Boba Fett and how it made me feel to this story about this YouTuber. I don't know if you guys had heard this or not, but popular Star Wars YouTuber and other fans expressed their disappointment in Lucasfilm exec Pablo Hidalgo's alleged response to an emotional reaction video. I'm reading this straight from the Twitter news coalition thing. The creator of the YouTube channel Star Wars Theory, excuse me. The creator of the YouTube channel Star Wars Theory, which has nearly 3 million subscribers, posted a video of himself reacting to a scene from The Mandalorian. The video reached some online mockery, which Star Wars Theory accused Hidalgo of supporting. So here's the deal. I'm not familiar with this channel at all. I don't know anything about this dude. But oh yeah, I was watching his stream right before this one, so maybe I should just ask Jeremy to jump on and do it. But so from what I understand, let me see if I can bring up these tweets here. Share my screen, and okay, so I think this was the first one. Pablo Hidalgo is chiming in on this thread, which is making fun of me for being emotional over Luke Skywalker. I don't mind trolls, but I can't see what he said, and I'd hate to believe he would join in as a Lucasfilm official. And then basically somebody sends him the screen grab. Well, here it is. Basically, Pablo validating that post and undermining my emotions. Expected more from someone so high up at Lucasfilm. That's really shitty to see. Let me see. I had another tweet related to that. Give me just a sec here. I will share my screen again. Because yeah, I don't really know much about Star Wars content creators. It's just not the space where I live. So anyway, another tweet from Star Wars Theory. Pablo chimes in to make fun, deletes the tweet, then puts one of them as his header. How is this acceptable from someone so high up at Lucasfilm? You're telling people it's not okay to have emotions about the work your company produces, and you make fun of them for crying? ? Not okay. So yeah, so basically, I'm doing this out of order here. So yeah, so basically, this dude, Mr. Star Wars Theory, did a reaction video to the Luke Skywalker scene, and he's emotional about it and he cries. And then this Pablo Hidalgo dude is really shitty in this tweet. He says emotions are not for sharing. So with the implication being that he's taking shots at this guy and making fun of him. Now, where I kind of come in on this, I mean, so I saw this blowing up on Twitter today, and like do some backfill research to figure out what the heck anybody was actually talking about. Is I have seen kind of like a weirdly defensive side of the fandom. I've seen folks that, well, there's a lot of there's a lot about Star Wars fandom and folks in Star Wars fandom and factions of the Star Wars fandom that, quite frankly, I don't understand. There are casual fans, there are voracious fans, and then there's the chuds. And in the Disney era, from Force Awakens forward, it's become increasingly difficult for me to keep score and figure out who's who. Um, and not to put too fine a point on it, my fandom of Transformers is actually kind of, in a sense, a response to my being burnt out on Star Wars fandom. Um, because, like, there's only so many posts I can see about Rey being a Mary Sue. It's like, I don't care. I I don't think she's a great character. Um, I do like what she represents is in terms of, inclusion and representation. Um, I don't know. And more or less what's happened is that my feelings about this franchise have been challenged. And like I said, like I I'm one of those guys, again, that looks like me, that responded very badly to The Last Jedi. And I'm just like, this more or less, not only is it not my Star Wars, but it's Star Wars telling me that it doesn't want me. And I it's weird. You wait a handful of years and then something like Mandalorian comes around where it's like, John Favreau has been like on Front Street about his inclusion of the fandom. And I don't know. I fall in a couple different um perspectives in terms of, like, on one hand, I know that ultimate fan service is, in the end, not very satisfying. But some fan service certainly is satisfying. And that's why I think all of us are just going bonkers for this Mandalorian. I mean, it's like, I think if Mandalorian was just um a Boba Fett TV show and then Luke Skywalker shows up, I think it would be pretty hollow. But if it's something to where it has established as its own thing, and then you give me Boba Fett, and then you give me Luke Skywalker, um, it's kind of that definition of I'll allow it. Anyway, back to this controversy here is that, like, in a sense, I don't know the players well enough to know who the good guys are or who the bad guys are. Because, like, I mean, in Transformers fandom, I've kind of sort of figured it out. It's like, oh, that's right, that dude's a chud. I didn't know. Well, now I know. Yeah, that kind of thing. So I'm very this sounds terrible, but I'm leery of content creators because I just who knows? I mean, and I think sometimes that folks might feel that way about me and the content that I do because I pride myself on being incredibly progressive, but I also know that I'm probably one of those James Gunn like deep dives away from, folks being like, oh, well, I don't know about this guy. I mean, look at the episodes I've done with Killing Spree, where basically we're savaging the sequel trilogy, or God forbid somebody figure out where I work, that kind of thing in terms of um how folks view somebody based by who they follow on Twitter. I don't know. I'm getting far afield on that, but what I'm trying to say is I don't know who this guy is. I don't know anything about him, but what I do know is that there is a corner of the fandom that I think is disproportionately sensitive. So like I remember there was a thing a couple years ago where like the actor who played Admiral Akbar was so distraught on the set of Last Jedi that he was crying in his suit. And that more or less when this came out, kind of like the um more or less he was made fun of for it. And then the folks that came to his defense were the wrong people. I don't know if I can say that without further research, but it was, you know, um it was accounts and YouTubers that do what I consider to be uh provocative, abrasive content. And again, my ignorance in this scene is really starting to show here. And but I, I saw a lot of those same folks kind of jumping on this issue with this Star Wars theory guy and this Pablo Hidalgo guy. So it's I find myself very um mixed and unsure. But um at a time where we're putting did that screen refresh? There it goes. So later earlier this afternoon, Pablo Hidalgo put out a tweet and says, I wish to clarify that my post that quote unquote emotions are not to be shared was sarcastic self mockery and was certainly not intended to be hurtful to anyone. And I am deeply sorry that it was. As a lifelong fan, I appreciate fans expressing how they feel. It's what being a fan is about! Exclamation point. We can't all be in movie theaters or at conventions right now, so express yourself online. Parentheses. In fact, those of us not prone to such displays will quietly live vicariously through your energy. That's a lot to unpack because it's a very mixed bag. Apologies. One, Homeboy sounds out of touch. I don't know what age range we're looking at is, but it feels like someone who has just discovered the internet and um has just now discovered that react are a thing. Like, I'm a fan of Kevin Smith, so I mean, I'll watch that dude ball at the drop of a hat. I mean, shit, the dude cried watching Tomorrowland on a plane. So, you know, it just, some folks, and I think that's all right. Also, um, I think things like this are harmful to destigmatizing how folks express themselves and being true to their emotions. Like I I think the closest that I come and again, I don't cry at movies. Not because hands on hips like, oh, I don't it's just I don't connect in that way. Like I've joked in the past. I'm like, shoot, I didn't even cry when Wolverine died. So, but I do have those swellings of emotions. Like I'll get like, throat clenches or just other physical manifestations of that emotional connection to things. And, bringing it back to the Boba Fett thing, I I had that kind of reaction. Like, I had told you a couple weeks ago. It's like I literally like reached out and squeezed my wife's hand. I'm like, he's back. And it was just like this the closest that I get to that type of emotional response. And when I was talking about it a couple weeks ago here on the podcast, I I could feel my eyes getting heavier. In a tweet I put like being glassy eyed. I went back and looked at the tape, and it doesn't look like there's any difference, but it just kind of physically felt that way, for lack of a better term. But I don't know. Like, and again, I have no judgment for folks that do um choose to express themselves that way. So okay. So Jeremy has some insight that I would like to share. Um let's see. Star Wars Theory has been having watch parties when Mando went live on the Plus every week, and he had a genuine breakdown when Luke showed up. He later explained that he didn't have the best childhood, and Luke was a figure he looked up to, much like a lot of us had with Optimus. And he's absolutely right. And even now, I didn't realize it was live, and that makes that type of emotional expression that much more pure and authentic. I got no problem with that, because like that's being somebody that works in live content, whether it's for the podcast here or for my work. It's like those are the moments that you crave, where like I've had reporters on some of my talk radio shows that I produce, like, start to actually like break as they're talking about a heart-wrenching story, because on talk radio they can kind of take off their more objective journalist hat, and it's like it's the authenticity that you crave. So that's yeah. And again, when Luke showed up, I mean, I didn't have that same. I totally understand everyone's connection to Luke Skywalker. Quite frankly, I think I got more emotional when R2D2 showed up, because it's like, there's something comforting and reassuring and transportative about those familiar bleeps and whistles, and kind of that he's telling the little dude that everything's going to be okay. So it's that worked for me. I mean, the Luke stuff, it worked for me because it was cool. It's just like, yeah, that is super rad. But I don't I I just don't have that same connection to Luke. Jeremy continues. He said on his stream tonight that he has been contacted by Pablo and Lucasfilm and has no interest in talking with them. He just wants to keep making his stuff. Good for him. Screw those guys. Also, as a Lucasfilm employee, any public interaction should be a lot better than this. Sarcasm never works well in text. Yes. Having been somebody that has written emails that land wrong, that I have responded to tweets in certain ways that have been misinterpreted, to say nothing about text messages. Like, shoot, I've had a couple dust ups with my mom because of the way that tone isn't easily conveyed through the written word, through text, especially something as fast and as impersonal as a text message or a tweet. So yeah, it's I guess leave the snark to Wendy's. But yeah, no, Yeah. Let's see. So, let's see. Shar, I got chills when Boba Fett and Luke showed up in the show, and Jeremy R2 is the hero of the saga. And that was kind of my postmodern takeaway from the prequels. It's just like, yeah, no, R2D2 is really kind of getting his due. And one of my many disappointments with the sequel trilogy is that you get some C3PO, but not nearly enough, but you get like virtually no R2. And I do think though that probably one of the best moments in that Last Jedi, in that it's R2 showing Luke the original projection of Princess Leia, saying, you're my only hope. And even Luke acknowledging it, saying that was a low blow. That scene still works. I liked it. I watched the prequels as R2 telling the stories to Luke and embellishing a bit. Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting. I wonder, so one of the projects that was announced for the Disney Plus was a droid story, which I think is a standalone film, or it's like a one shot type of thing. But yeah, I wonder sometimes if they um would kind of square that circle of kind of more or less the Skywalker saga through the prism of R2D2, because he's the only one that was there from episode 1 through the end. And again, that's where I think one of the things that the prequels kind of have over the sequels, in that, like, you know, R2 is almost always around. So it's I don't know where else to go with that. And you know what? I am looking at the time, and I got to this really took a turn into Mando territory, and I didn't get to a lot of the material that I wanted to get to. I think I'm going to record a separate show talking about my top 9 Instagram for the year, because for a lot of us, 2020 was a terrible year, between the pandemic, civil unrest, protests, and the ongoing concern of social justice. But as this year draws to a close, and again, this is our last show of the year, um I I struggle with gratitude. And what I wanted to do tonight originally was, there's this meme generator thing on Instagram, where it gives you your top 9. It's a popularity contest. It just kind of aggregates the 9 posts that folks have liked the most. But I did this a couple years ago, and I realized that um counting one's blessings is more of a Thanksgiving thing. But I know I take many blessings in my life for granted. And anyway, so yeah, I'll do that at a different time. Kind of go through some of those 9 posts and kind of tell some of the stories about that. Because I mean, 2020 in its own way was still kind of like a landmark transitional year for us. We moved to a new house, and had adventures there. But before I get out of here, there was one last thing I wanted to mention. And I didn't want to leave without saying it, because I tweeted about it and wanted to make sure that I covered it. A friend of the show, Lucia Fasano, has a brand new EP that she just put out. In fact, like, she just put it out like an hour before I went live. So I wanted to talk about that before I left. So she writes, and this is actually in her write up. Hi, before the new year, have an EP of 2 songs from my song commissions and 1 extra. I was asked to write songs based on my friends, journalist Brock Wilbur and Vivian Kane's rescue pets. As a owner of rescue pets myself, these songs are imbued with the bittersweet feelings about our pets and their origins. An EP that follows the journey of rescue cat Kimball, dynamic duo Woodward and Bernstein, and rescue dog Trips, as they find love, acceptance, and safety for the first time. And I don't have, oh, what have I done? I don't have the name of the EP in front of me because I'm a terrible show host. I got my notes all scrambled up and thought I had it. Anyway, so the EP is called Because They Are Baby. That is by Lucia Fasano. That is available on her Bandcamp page. And it's a 3-song EP. Let me see if I can bring this up here. Just one sec. There we go. Okay, so yeah, so Because They Are Baby, the new EP from Lucia Fasano is available now on her Bandcamp page, and it is about rescue pets, and I think we can all relate to that in our own ways, and because I mean, who doesn't love doggos? And who doesn't love the kitties? But I also want to remind you that Lucia is open for song commissions. She opened her commissions a couple months ago. Hit her up on her social channels for more info. And when you do, let her know that that Mike guy, that podcaster guy from Seattle sent you. I'm getting scrambled. It's getting towards the end of the night, kids. But yeah, no. Podcast listeners will know her music from our theme song, or at least the alternate theme song that I put here on the live streams, the ukulele version of the Mike Seibert Radio theme song. She's one of my favorite independent artists that I've connected with over the years. So I have personally commissioned her for the theme song, and I love it. And that collaboration is a lot of fun. So I just kind of wanted to do a quick, signal boost for that. Go check out the new EP. And Because They Are Baby from friend of the show, Lucia Fasano. And I think with that will do it for this week's episode. But hey, real quick, 2 quick reminders before I get out of here. Next week, Dave Sanders returns, and we're talking fall and winter TV. We pushed it back a week. We were originally going to do it tonight, but we thought that waiting until after the new year would be a good time to have a better, clearer picture of what's going on with network TV, what's back, what's not, and what that landscape looks like. And then, of course, coming up on Sunday, January 10th at 2 p.m. Pacific time, it's my interview with Emmy Award-winning singer-songwriter Stan Bush, the one and only. We will be talking about his new album, Dare to Dream, available now at stanbush.com. And of course, we will discuss his songs from the Transformers the movie, Dare and The Touch. But again, that will wrap things up for this week's episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much for interacting and commenting and keeping that chat lit. Huge shout out to Jeremy and Shar and Dave Cabal and James from the Distance Nerding podcast. Check those guys out as well. Yeah, this is probably the liveliest chat we've had in some time, and I think that's a really cool way to close out the year. I would love to hang out longer, but I'm getting tired. I've been working all day. And if you want to listen to my podcast, Mike Seibert Radio Podcast, and all of my past shows, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, or wherever the heck else you listen to your podcast. And you can check out the full show archive out on SoundCloud, 5 years and over 300 episodes worth of shows out there. And come on back for the After Hours live stream Monday nights at 8 p.m. Pacific time on Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook Live. Like, share, rate, and review the show. Let us know what you like and what you'd like to hear more of in the future. Mike Seibert Radio is powered by Poddex. Use my discount code MSRP10 at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Poddex.com. Special thanks to Dave Sanders for our production elements. For Mike Seibert Radio, my name is Mike, and until next year, wear a mask, wash your hands, and make good choices. Good night.